What? What? I'm so confused. I'm so confused at this one-star review. What is going on? Hey guys, today we are doing what seems to be an ever-present Booktube favourite, which is reacting to one-star reviews of your favourite books. Today I'm going to react to one-star reviews of my top 10 books I read in 2021. If you haven't seen my list, if you haven't seen that top 10, there should be a card up here to that video. You can go have a look at that first so you don't get spoiled for it. And then you can come back and see my reactions to some of these one-star reviews, undoubtedly, that I am going to really hate. There should be no spoilers in this. I'm going to redact anything that might be spoilery for any of these books because I want you to see the good and the bad and see my reactions, but I don't want you to be spoiled for these books because I love these so much. So let's jump straight in. So first up is The Poison Song by Jen Williams. This is book 3 of the Winnowing Flame trilogy. If you've read through to book 3, I imagine you're probably going to enjoy the series somewhat. So there are not many one-star reviews for this. Blair, what a waste of time this was. A pity how the series went downhill with both characterization and plot after the first book. Wow, savage. I disagree a lot. Definitely not a waste of time in my opinion. And the characterization I think only improves actually, in my personal opinion. I can see what they're saying about the plot going downhill after the first book. I actually think the second book's plot was a little bit less exciting, but book 3's plot was great. I cannot disagree pretty much any more than I am. So there we go. Wow. That is the only one-star review for this on Goodreads. So again, if you're going to get to the third book of a trilogy, there's probably not going to be too much hate for it. A few other one-star ratings, but that's it in terms of reviews. Short and sweet, and I don't really agree. Next up is Seasons of Albadone, which is a self-published book by Christopher Warman and Alain Marche. It contains 4 short stories, maybe short novella length stories that are interrelated and follow on chronologically from different character viewpoints. This is not very well known. It only has 71 ratings and 30 reviews, and its average rating is 4.21 stars. So let's see if we've got any one-star reviews. So it turns out there is only one singular one-star rating of this book that comes with 0 review. So I'm going to have to look at some of these 3 stars because there's not any 2-star ratings. I'm going to have a look at some of these 3 stars to see what people think. Okay, let's go with this one. It says, it's generally just okay. Full disclosure, I got this book for free as part of a special promotion to celebrate a first book being published, and this does bear the marks of a first book. That's not to say it's bad, just a bit unrefined. The pacing could use a bit more work, and there are a few tell don't show elements, but there are other moments where the theme is both holistically successful and ageless. Okay, so that's not very negative at all. I don't necessarily agree on the idea of it being unrefined. I actually think it's really well connected and works really well, but that's okay. This is a very unnegative point for Season of Albadone, and that's actually a big advantage. You guys should go read it, and you can go and leave positive reviews, or if you hate it and you think I'm stupid, you can go and leave negative reviews, but go and read it. Next up is Dogs of War by Adrian Tchaikovsky. I read a lot of Tchaikovsky this year, and I think Dogs of War was my favourite, hence why it made this list. But there's going to be some hate for this, I can feel it coming. This could have been developed into both a thought-provoking work on robot rights and AI ethics, as in Asimov's I, Robot, and a good old-fashioned bang-bang shoot-you-down sci-fi novel. Sadly, the narrative is confused and at times frustrating. Confused and at times frustrating. I don't actually know what they're getting at there. It seems... That makes it sound like it's very intricate and that there's a lot of different pieces going on in the plot, but it's not really. I don't know why it's frustrating. I think it's just a very good book. Great, let's move on to another one and see what they say. Okay, here we go. Found one. Warning to the seasoned reader. This is literature for the brain dead. I was recommended this book online and was curious to check it out as the author is British and getting some recognition lately. Wow, what a shock it was to read this thing. I guess I am not the target audience. This book is clearly intended for those who read 1 or 2 books a year, tops. Know nothing about sci-fi, have a very limited vocabulary, and are just looking for something extremely light to pass the time. For the seasoned readers, I'll summarise the novel in 3 key points. The story is based on one of the most used concepts in sci-fi, another form of being becoming intelligent enough to earn rights amongst humans. Hello, Star Trek. The form is also one of the most used in recent years, another story told from the viewpoint of the main character, who at first cannot talk too good, and then learns how to express himself a little better. Thirdly, everyone knows about the rule of writing, show, don't tell, while this novel achieves exactly the opposite. Tell, don't show is the motif here. If you're a seasoned reader, stay clear from Tchaikovsky, indulge yourself in some modern literature like Alastair Reynolds, or if you like stories about dogs, by all means, Jack London's White Fang is still the reference. Whoa. I've read a lot of Tchaikovsky this year. I really like Tchaikovsky, but the fact that he's saying this is literature for the brain dead, okay, so he's making out that this is just a book that is like, you know, almost popcorn, you don't have to think about it too much. I disagree. I strongly disagree. I think there are some great themes in here. I can't believe he said that. But then the fact that he says this is clearly intended for those who read 1 or 2 books a year tops, know nothing about sci-fi, have a very limited vocabulary. Okay, I read 101 books last year, so I know plenty of people have read more than that, but I read 101 books last year. A good 20 odd of them were sci-fi, probably. What? This book is brilliant. Like, yeah, it has some tropes, it has some themes that we see in sci-fi pretty regularly. That's understandable. That's how genres work. They have conventions, they have things that, you know, touchstones. But to say that this is for someone who reads 1 or 2 books a year and wants something really light to pass the time, and that it is for the brain dead, that's absolutely obscene. This book is very well thought through. The theming is great. It is done well. It is written well. I don't know what his point is about the vocabulary. Is that just because the main character starts out not being able to speak very well? So therefore he assumes that that's just to placate those of us who can't actually have a big vocabulary? I don't get what he's going on about. This is absolute madness. And don't get me wrong, where he's gone, he suggested you should read some Alastair Reynolds. I like Alastair Reynolds. I think Alastair Reynolds is great. There's a reason Alastair Reynolds is up there on my bookshelf. Like, I love his sci-fi. I think he's very good. But to take a space opera style sci-fi and try and compare that and therefore look down unfavourably upon a more character-based thematic sci-fi is just strange. They're different things. They're accomplishing different things. And I actually think the theming of Tchaikovsky's work is, if anything, more poignant and better than some of Reynolds. So, yeah, absolute madness. Absolute madness. Here's another. DNF'd at page 28. I'm flabbergasted that I bailed out so early, but it was too painful to carry on. The only thing I remember about Dogs of War is its stunning hardcover. Other than that, the writing is pretty clunky, and the switching between first-person and third-person POVs poked me in the eyes really hard and gave me a headache. Other people may like this book, but it just didn't sit well with me. So that's more balanced, even though they only read 28 pages of it. I never really noticed the going from first to third person being an issue. Like, that's just, some books do that. It's never really bothered me, but okay, if that makes your head hurt, fair play to you. I like that they appreciate that other people may like this book, because the first guy I read clearly thought that only morons would enjoy this book, which, yeah, this person at least gives a little bit of leeway that maybe other people will like it, and that's fine, which I did. I love this book. Dogs of War, brilliant book. Adrian Tchaikovsky, you guys should go check it out. Right, moving on from that savagery, let's move on to In the Labyrinth of Drakes. This is book 4 in the Memoirs of Lady Trent by Marie Brennan. Let's see what people have to say about this. Oh, this will be an interesting one, because this is someone who seems to have enjoyed the first 3 books of the series but doesn't like this one. DNF. I binged the first 3 in the series, then had to wait for this one to be available from the library. And now that I'm halfway through it, so that's chapter 12, page 179, I've realised I'm sick of this series. It feels like the same story being told over and over. I'm not sure if the writing got worse as the series went along, or if I'm just finding it repetitive. but I'm no longer charmed by the Victorian travelogue diary style, and am instead finding the apologia and various commentary to be obnoxious. Okay, I understand some of the complaints here. Like the first 4 books do have lots of similarities running through them, but that's kind of what you're getting into with this series. I think by the end of book 3 you should have realised that's what you're getting into here, which it is partially about the dragons and the study of dragons, but so much more about sociology, anthropology, political machinations in different cultures, and Dame Isabella learning how to navigate different cultures as a woman, where many of these cultures, including her own, really don't think that she should be doing the job she's doing. And that's really what is being debated and discussed and, you know, explored in this work. And I don't think you can fault it for continuing the way it began. But maybe you can get bored of it, and maybe that's fair. Here's another one. Reads like a romance novel from the perspective of a prudish accountant. My favourite part is the accurate chapter headings, which allow you to find your place after falling asleep. How is this series dealing with dragons so dry? Oh my days, that is such a backhanded compliment. Wow. Yeah, the chapter headings are incredibly specific and clear as to where you were. I don't think that's the reason for why they were there, but if that helps you, great. How is the series dealing with dragons so dry? Because it's not really about the dragons. I will say this again, and I've said this before in my wrap-ups, that the series is sort of tangentially about dragons, but is mainly about Lady Isabella and her dealing with different cultures and the sociology and the anthropology and political machinations and cultural norms and cultural taboos. That's what it's about. And the dragons are sort of a little bit secondary, although still pretty relevant. Yeah, I can understand what they're saying, even if I actively disagree. I don't think it was falling asleep worthy. If anything, I think the first books in the series, the first book specifically in the series, was probably the worst. So the people here are saying that they think it's getting worse. I think they're just getting bored with the series, because if anything, I think the writing actually improves quite a lot throughout, in my personal opinion. Right, moving on to Saint's Blood, Book 3 of The Greatcoats by Sebastian de Castell. I love The Greatcoats. I read it very quickly this year. I binged it pretty thoroughly. Saint's Blood is book 3 and often the most maligned, even though I really love it. So we'll be interested to see what people make of it here. I'm going to predict before I've read anything that people are going to complain about a side questy plot, which I disagree with. I think there's some great character evolution in that plot, but I'm sure that's what people are going to complain about. Who else knows what else they're going to complain about? How this series went so wrong so fast bewilders me. It just so happens that 3 books into the series, the author decided to make some changes. First, he replaced his previous lengthy chapters with oddly short ones. Then he hiked up the level of humour used, it bordered on lame. And to make matters worse, he introduced a new element to the game, romance. All this culminated in the brutal tossing of the book across the room and me seriously considering not finishing right there and there. I just found myself not remotely interested in what's happening in the story or with the characters or how the series ends. Having completely lost interest about halfway through, I decided I'm not to continue. That's exactly when something really weird happened. I could see all that is wrong with these books. It was like all the flaws were jumping off the page and slapping me in the face. I don't think the series will be remembered for long. Wow, okay, so I find this very interesting that he thinks some of these things have only just entered in book 3, which I completely disagree with. Yeah, the chapter lengths I couldn't comment on, I didn't really notice. But hiking up the level of humour and saying it bordered on lame, the humour's not really changed. There's maybe a little bit more in book 2 and 3 than there is in book 1, but there's not an appreciable difference between book 2 and book 3. Like, Brasty is cracking stupid jokes from the beginning of book 2 till the end of book 4. And the only reason he's not cracking those jokes in book 1 is that he's off with Kest a bit more and we don't see him from Falkir's viewpoint so much. So the only reason that the humour feels like it's hiked up is the comic relief character is actually present, unlike book 1. The books are longer than book 1, but it's not changed since book 2. Brasty's been a stupid, joke-making wise-ass since the beginning of the series, and we have seen it all over the place since the beginning of book 2. Like, to think that the humour has only just been introduced here, no mate, you've just been ignoring it. You've just been ignoring it, or it's just started to grate on you. Like, it's not a new addition. And similarly, saying that he's added in romance for the first time here in book 3 that wasn't needed, that's also not true. Like, romance has been a small but present part of this series since the beginning. Like, that the romance I'm assuming he's talking about is with a character that we meet in the first book. And it's not new. Like, it may have developed, but it's not new. Like, I really don't get what this guy's on about. Like, the fact that he's only just noticed these problems and he doesn't like them now in book 3 just tells me that he wasn't paying attention. Like, if you don't like them in book 1, great, don't read any more. But he's just not been paying attention. Oh my days. This is not book 3's fault. This is not Saint's Blood fault. This is just something about the Greatcoats. And if you don't like it, you don't like the Greatcoats. That's fine. Man. Now this is really where we're getting to the stage where people are going to start hurting my feelings. They're going to hurt my babies and I can't cope with it. Next up is a Desolation called Peace by Arcadia Martin. This was released in 2021 and is a sequel to A Memory Called Empire, both of which I gave 5 stars. I read back to back and it's my favourite sci-fi series. I think it's brilliant. So first up, not for me, didn't enjoy it one bit, couldn't get into the writing style. Fair dues. Can't argue with that. If you don't enjoy the writing style, you're not enjoying the book, that's fine. I'm interested that they started with Desolation called Peace. I wonder if they enjoyed the writing style in The Memory Called Empire and then they continued or what, but interesting. Right, let's start with the next one. I'm going to be the outlier here. Perhaps if I had read the second book immediately after the first, I might be more engaged. As it is, I made 32% into the book with only minimal plot progress, as in we're still in exposition. I'll lodge my usual complaint about exposition going past the 20-25%. This book was molasses. Okay, it's hard for me to know because I did read them back to back, which obviously this person didn't, and I think that might have harmed their involvement and their engagement. It wasn't the fastest start. Now that didn't bother me, but I can get what they're saying here. It wasn't the fastest start. If you want a bang bang start, you want to get right into the action, this book didn't really do that. So, okay, fair dues. I can get on board with that, I suppose. Okay, this is going to be an interesting one. This is one who starts by saying that they enjoyed and admired the first book. So, interesting that they've gone for 1 star here. So, I enjoyed and admired the first book, but after a week of picking up and putting down this one, I quit halfway through. It took me many pages to get reacquainted with the first book. That's not too unusual as my memory is going. The chapters are relatively short and from different characters, so things move along quickly. But I think that each chapter at this time it was too choppy or too short or too little happened for my continued interest. Rats. I was looking forward to this, and the title seems to indicate that everything goes to hell. Yeah, it sounds like this person is really sad that they're not enjoying this as much as they wanted to, which I get is disappointing if you're not enjoying it as much as you did the first one. Yeah, these aren't as brutal as I was expecting them to be for this book, so that's quite nice. Right, next up is Towers of Midnight. That's book 13 of The Wheel of Time that I read last year. It's by Brandon Sanderson and Robert Jordan. Brandon Sanderson finished this series after Robert Jordan's unfortunate and untimely death, and this is the second book that Sanderson had been a part of, and I can guess right now what I think these reviews are going to say. I'm sure there's a bunch of people who are going to be spewing Sanderson hate, saying he's not as good as Jordan, he's messed up some of the characters. I'm sure there's one character in particular that I'm sure they're going to say that he didn't write properly and he's not right anymore. And I actually really disagree. I barely could tell the difference. The difference between Sanderson writing him and Jordan writing him, I think was minimal to me, and actually just felt like the character evolving. Brandon Sanderson himself has said that he didn't nail that character in The Gathering Storm book 12, and he's never really got to grips with him, so it's probably a fair cop because Sanderson says it himself that he didn't really get to grips with that character as well as he'd have liked to, but I'm sure that's what's going to be coming up. I'm just reading the first paragraph of this 1-star review and it feels like it should be a positive review, so let me read it to you. It's quite a long review, I might not read all of it, but very interesting. It feels like a different series now. The pace is moving at least 3 times as fast as the later Jordan books, and that's being charitable. Let's face it, there's about 100 pages of Crossroads of Twilight where the sum total of action was that Elaine took a bath. There are seemingly endless stretches where Jordan would devote a page or 2 to an Aes Sedai raising an eyebrow, or worse, almost raising an eyebrow. On top of that, the emotional range of the characters has expanded greatly. It seemed for about 5 books that the characters experienced a range of emotions varying from seething anger to fury. On top of that, we might get a helping of scorn or condescension, but the rest of the emotional palette was pretty much absent. And now it has returned, and not just for... And the biggest news is that the major characters have finally stopped their never-ending state of denial. Instead of simply denying what they have become, blank and blank and blank, are now starting to embrace it. Although I like this shift, it doesn't seem as organic as it should, and I think that largely results from the radical speeding up of the glacial pace of the earlier books. Because these changes happen so fast, they seem a bit forced to me, and they also leave me wondering how cool the series might have been if Jordan had focused on bringing about these changes, instead of either ignoring the issue or having the characters cling on to their state of denial. Blah, 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 plot stuff, then minor spoilers. Interesting, I find it really interesting that those first 3 paragraphs to me sound like they hated book 10, which a lot of people do, and then they are annoyed that the pace has picked up and the characters have improved. And the pace picking up isn't a bad thing because there are some middle books there that are pretty slow. So the fact that they're saying the pace picked up, the characters feel much more realistic and much more emotionally balanced, and the plot is starting to progress. 1 star. What? What? I'm so confused. How do you 1 star this book when you think it's, as far as I can tell, you're saying it's a big improvement over the previous books? I'm so confused at this 1 star review. What is going on? Here's another one. This book could have been 150 pages long. I've never read a series that was more in need of an editor than Wheel of Time. Now I'll write the rest of the review in the style of Robert Jordan. I've got 1 more to go, and Blood and Bloody Ashes, I'm going to finish it, even though it will be torture. Light, I hate this series. Oh, I'm just being a stubborn man. I'm going to sit a serving girl on my knee. This review does not smell happy. Seriously, 850 pages of this. These books are bad. Period. To be fair to whoever wrote this, to Eric, that's actually quite funny. His Jordan imitation, although massively a massive caricature, is actually pretty funny. So I'll give him that. I don't think it could have been 150 pages long. I feel like this one actually has quite a lot more happening. If he'd said this about book 10, much more fair cop. I feel like a lot of people in this review are taking their frustrations out on this book, on Tales of Midnight, because of other things that have happened earlier in the series, and their complaints aren't actually really about Tales of Midnight. That's my view anyway. So next up, Kings of the Wyld by Nicholas Ames is pretty much the first book I read in 2021, and I absolutely loved it. I think it's brilliant, and I am certain that all of these reviews are going to say was not funny. Here we go. DNF, page 280. If you think it's utterly hilarious that a wizard dressed in a onesie uses his cure against erectile dysfunction in a skirmish against opponents to give allies and enemies, well, you'll find this book great. It's not my kind of humour, and this book is full of it. It made it that I never cared for whatever happened, nor felt any attachment to any of the characters, except perhaps for Clay, who repeatedly wants his adventure to be over so that he can go home. I felt the same. Wow. Do you know what? I will give it to some of these Ron Star reviewers. They do make funny comments. Yeah, fair play. Yeah, I think that is oversimplifying the humour of this book. Yes, there are some crude and crass and silly things in it that happen that you will either find funny or not. And I wouldn't normally claim that's my style of humour, but I think that's massively underplaying how good the rest of the book is, and I think a lot of the humour is not as crass and as crude as that. And I also think I knew there'd be so many people here who DNF'd pre 300 pages, because I think the last 100 or so pages of this are absolutely incredible, and they move from the funny, or trying to be funny, to the actually poignant and, you know, thematically relevant and actually emotionally relatively hard-hitting. Now I know there'll be plenty of people who hate this book, and that's fine, and there'll be plenty of people who say, well, the first 3/4 wasn't for me, so why would I keep reading? Fair again. Here we go. I was hoping I'd see someone here. Here is my friend, 1-star review on the DNF shelf, Klaus over at the Contradictorian. Go and check him out. I thought I might find him in here. Let's go. Here we go. 10 out of 25, 40%. DNF at 61%, 1 star. Now, Klaus gives anything he DNFs a 1 star, so that's fair dues. Look, the humour is hit or miss, and it was miss for me, okay? This felt like a Discworld book without Pratchett's sense of humour. I read the first 60%, then skipped to the ending, and guess what? I don't seem to have missed anything. I couldn't get attached to the characters at any point, and I just didn't care about anything that happened. The whole band could have been brutally murdered, and I wouldn't have shed a single tear. Because in my opinion, they're just a bunch of old men leading uninteresting conversations, making bad jokes, and miraculously surviving every catastrophe they stumble into. I liked a particular fight and some of the speeches, that's about it. Good idea, bad execution, more like a 2-star book, but it was a DNF, so 1 star. Yeah, go check out Klaus's review to this. I will leave the link down below. Yeah, I thought he might be here. I agree and disagree. Yeah, if the humour doesn't work for you, it's going to be a really tough read for most of it, yeah? I'm interested to see how Klaus's opinions might have changed if he'd read the whole of it, but if you're not enjoying it, you shouldn't keep reading it, so that's fine. But yeah, I would be interested to see if it would have had more of an impact on him had he not skipped to the end. I get his point. Very fair, saying they're just a bunch of old men leading uninteresting conversations, making bad jokes, and miraculously surviving every catastrophe they stumble into. I thought some of their conversations weren't that uninteresting, but there is a lot of this going on. It is very much a D&D riff of a book, and so you are going to get that kind of feel to it. And if it's not funny, if you don't think the humour works for you, fair play, you're not going to love it. Let's move on from Kings of the Wyld. Now, these last 2 books are ones that I can't really think of what people are going to be hating about them. Like, I thought these books were both pretty incredible. The first one of these is The Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne. This is the first book in a new series, so you're going to get a lot more people who are trying Gwynne for the first time on this book. They're not coming in from prior books in the series, so there should be more hate for it, I imagine, for people who aren't getting what they're expecting. But I don't really know what they're going to complain about, so let's see. This is a fair review from Michael S. I tried. It got really weird and repetitive. I think it was the detailed descriptions of troll testicles that ended it for me. I'd kind of forgotten about that, but yeah, okay. I think that particular complaint is probably fair dues, Michael. John Gwynne is, by the way, a reenactor, a historical reenactor in the Viking period. Normally, I think he does most. So here we go. If you're, say, a Viking reenactor who is really excited by the fact that the proper name for a fighting knife is a seax, or that your weapons belt helps hold some of the weight of your mail shirt, and that you're really glad that a book would use some word that I can't remember for a mail shirt, then boy have I got a book for you. Unfortunately, the characters aren't super sympathetic, and for much of the book, they're all off on meandering adventures that aren't tying together. And then all of a sudden, in the last 50 pages, all the things happen, and it would be really exciting if maybe I'd been able to care by that point. So I probably won't be finishing the series. Okay, I didn't feel their plots were meandering. I didn't feel their adventures were meandering. I thought their adventures were interesting, and we were gaining a lot of character development. I really liked how it was relatively slow paced at the start, because I think that we gained really good understanding of the characters. You say none of them are sympathetic. I would claim that a couple of them are sympathetic. There's one, maybe 1.5 that are less so. But I disagree. I think that meandering adventure was really important for building the characters up and us getting to know them and setting us up for this trilogy. I'm really excited for book 2, if you can't tell. Right, here we go. DNF'd about a quarter into the book. I've heard so many amazing things about Gwynne's books, but I can't seem to be able to finish them. Same thing happened with Malice 2. I picked it up many times, but I couldn't read it more than a quarter. The book had a slow start, though. This book gave me a reading slump. So did Malice. Oh, I'm sorry this gave me a reading slump. That sucks. It is slow at the start. It is slow at the start. And that's the same with Malice. Malice feels slow at the start. So that's just a Gwynne book thing, and I can see why that might not work for people. So, okay, fair dues. Okay, here's one. So this is another DNF, actually, but no, I can't. I was so excited about this book and all the 5-star ratings, and I can't even make it past 60, past page 60. The writing style is so jarring, and his sentences are so ridiculous. They're unnecessarily long with too many phrases, and his comma usage is so wrong to me. I just can't jive with this style, and it's full. Nothing has happened in the first 60 pages. Okay, saying nothing's happened in the first 60 pages is a slight exaggeration, but it is pretty slow. However, I didn't notice anything about weird commas or super long sentences, so maybe I'm just oblivious, maybe I'm used to Gwyn's writing style, having read the whole of the Banished Land saga, but it just didn't feel weird to me. That seems like a strange complaint, but maybe if I read it again, I'll pick up on these things. Who knows? Maybe I was just blinded by how much I was enjoying the characters and the world. Yeah, all of these look like DNFs. Like, so many of these look like, not all, but so many of these look like DNFs where people have just said it's too slow. It's too slow and they don't like it. Great, let's move on. Let's move on to my baby. Let's move on to the one that's going to really, really hurt me. So yeah, here we go. Right, let's read these 1-star reviews for An Autumn War by Daniel Abraham, book 3 of the Long Price Quartet, which is one of my favourite fantasy series of all time. This is my favourite book from this series, and I'm sure it's going to make me feel very sad. Okay, as a reader, I know something is going wrong when I start skipping entire paragraphs without losing any sense of the plot. Such little plot there may have been in this case. Something just didn't gel for me here. Lots of inane drivel and not sure author has quite mastered writing from the female POV. Lots of ink poured into character development, yet most of the characters just seem flat and skewed. Flat. You're saying Ota Amati are flat. Flat. He used the word flat. Find myself largely rooting for, spoiler, since motives were clearer and straightforward and the resolution, well, writing wasn't too bad, so almost 2-star, but story and character development were a bit shallow for me. The story is not shallow. The plot is not shallow. The character development is not shallow. These are some of the best, deepest, most real characters I've ever read. The plot is slow, but is great. I cannot take that line seriously. I cannot take that line seriously at all. Yeah, most of the characters just seem flat and skewed. Flat. He used the word flat to describe the characters in the Long Price Quartet. Did we read different books? Did we actually read different books? Oh dear, the story was not shallow. The story was not shallow. Oh my days. Eesh. Oh, here we go. Here's a 1-star review that starts with an interesting sentence. The best book in the series to date by far, yet given it a 1-star. Abraham finally starts to unpack some of the nuances and challenges of plot relevant thing here. There is a wider selection of characters, and I would describe the tone as patriarchal and patronising rather than the blatant misogyny of book 2. Glad I read this one, since I was so disappointed in the judgment of the person who recommended the series to me after books 1 and 2. Blatant misogyny of book 2. It's a fantasy world. It's a fantasy world full of characters in a particular setting inspired by history. Yet not all fantasy books are going to be written in a way that the women have completely equal representation to the men. And if all fantasy series were like that, I would have a problem, yeah? We can't, you don't want that in every fantasy series, you don't want that in every series. But there are going to be series where it's much more equal, it's much more matriarchal even in some things. But there are going to be some series where it's not, and where it's a bit more historical, and that's fine. Oh, okay, I think I might be done. Let's see if I can get one more in. Here we go. I enjoyed the series up to this point, but I do not believe I will be able to make myself continue despite having the last book. Ota becomes less likeable as the series goes on, and the primary antagonist to introduce this book is as unlikely as he is one-dimensional. Although the climax had potential, the twist was interesting, the aftermath was executed in such a way that left all the characters out of such, and all the interesting portions of the book similarly expunged. What? 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 Firstly, the antagonist is not one-dimensional. I do not think that at all. I think that's a gross misreading of the text to say that the main antagonist here is one-dimensional. I'm not having it. I'm not having it. Yeah, and then to say that the aftermath just completely ruined everything. I don't understand. And I feel like you need to read the next book. He says he doesn't want to read the next book, but he needs to read the last book to see the aftermath. Oh, I don't get some people. I don't get some people. Anyway, this is way too long a video. This is a really, really long video. This is going to be a hell to edit. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed it. If you have enjoyed it, go check out whatever videos over here. If you haven't seen it already, go check out something else and click the like button. If you enjoyed it, because this has taken a lot of time to record, a lot of time to edit, let other people see it. And hopefully I'll see you guys again on the channel soon.